Do you just maintain your assets, or do you actually manage them? You really need a capital plan in order to properly manage your assets. Now, I'm not talking about capital projects that would be for occupancy changes and space planning, or even new buildings. We're talking about planning the work you need to do to maintain the functionality, the reliability, and the condition of the assets in your overall facility. Chillers, pumps, boilers, roofs, windows, paving, all of those things. So first, you really need to know what you have. Hopefully you have a good asset list. Hopefully you have a preventive maintenance system that asset list is in. You might even have a tool for doing capital planning. The list is important because without knowing all the different pieces of equipment and assets you have in your building, it's really tough to do a proper plan. So for every one of your assets, you should have the what it is, some sort of coding system so it's easy to deal with and find, the manufacturer, the model, the capacities, year of installation, year of refurbishment if you did a refurbishment on a chiller. All of that kind of data, maybe even some other stuff related to its performance, its location. This is a bare minimum that you should have. Even if it's in an Excel spreadsheet, that's where you should start with. So once you have your list, you need to think about what the condition is and other factors, but let's start with the condition of your assets. So how old it is going to play a part, but you should also have data from your preventive maintenance system, from your work order management, your help desk, call center, that give you an indication of how often work has had to be done on the equipment. When preventive maintenance routines are done, some notation should be taken, readings taken, and you should have a good reference, a base of reference information about your assets. You might also get a formal condition assessment done. You can do that internally, or you can hire outside engineering consulting firms to do that for you. Now, the third part, and this relates to the preventive maintenance data that I mentioned, is you've got technicians working on the equipment, whether it's your in-house people or you might have a contractor doing it for you. They're the ones who know the equipment. They've got their ear to the ground, they're at the equipment, and they should be able to give you a really good idea of the kind of condition things are in. Now, for each of these assets, it's really important to understand what the impact is. So, what matters about that asset? What does it serve? What's the impact of failure? Is it impacting a safety assets? Is it impacting operations like in a manufacturing or in a hospital or a data center? All of these things you need to know in addition to the condition information so that you can now make educated decisions about that equipment and whether it poses a risk and therefore should be replaced. And if that's the case, should it be replaced next year, in 2 years, in 12 years? To do that, you want to know what the criticality is and what the formal risk is, perhaps even in money, what the impact would be if it fails, either for replacing or repairing it based on a failure compared to replacing it in a planned method. So you know in advance, you can shut it down, you can organize everything around it. Once you have that, you would prioritize it. And the priority is going to be based on that risk. Is there some redundancy built in so it's not as important? Is it serving a really key business function and so it's really critical? Is it really hard to get spare parts if it fails? All of those things would be part of this. You can look at the classic risk approach of what's the impact of it and what's the probability of it happening. So the probability of failure, the impact if it fails. Using that, you either do it on a grid, or you can do a list multiplying those factors, say 1 to 5 for probability, 1 to 5 for impact, multiply them together, and obviously 25 is the highest impact, the highest probability. So it's probably something you want to deal with right away. But don't be caught up in the numbers game. Sometimes things are further down a priority list if you do it that way with math. but yet they're still critically important, and you might want to move those up to the top. So you always have to keep that in mind. It's always going to take a little bit of discussion and thinking about it and prioritization more than just those two factors. Okay, so now you've got the list. You know what the criticality is, you know what the cost is. You can start to make your plan. Now you should have a plan for next year. You should also have a plan for 3 years. So next year plus 2 others in a little more detail. And then you should also have a long-range plan, which could be 20, 25 years. The long-range plan is going to have less detail. It's more of an estimate, but it's going to give a clear idea to senior management of what they're looking for and what they're looking forward to in costs that are going to be down the road that maybe have to be dealt with. They won't be surprised in 5 years when you come and you say, I need this work done, because they will have seen it on the plan. So far I've sort of been talking about the actual work, so the projects that you would do to replace a chiller because the chiller is in really bad condition. In addition to that, I always recommend having 2 other pots of money. One, a pot of money that's going to allow you to do work, replacing things, refurbishing, that doesn't end up on a high priority list. Because we know you have limited funds and not everything's going to get done. Some things on the lower priority will never get done if you keep doing that every single year. They get pushed to a future year. So there's some things you might want to do even if they're not a high priority. So put aside some money for that. Otherwise, the less important things like some visual aspects, washroom refurbishments are always going to get pushed to the end. So the other thing is a feasibility study. If you know in 2 years you want to replace the chiller or upgrade the diesel generator capacity, you need some advanced engineering work and some consulting to understand what the implications are going to be and what it's going to cost you. You want to get a refinement of your overall large-scale plan. And that's why you should have money set aside for feasibility studies too. Now, once you've got your plan for next year, you've got to pitch it. You've got to go for funding. You've got to ask for the money you need to get everything done. Let's be honest, you're not going to get all the money. But you need to make the best possible pitch. So you need to use what you've done so far to figure it out. Your risk matrix, what's going to happen if it fails, how long it would take to repair or replace. If it does, what's the impact to operation? Figure that out, understand what senior management and finance wants to hear, and make sure they hear it. Then if they make a decision not to fund something, they're the one who's accepting the possible risk. Okay, that part was easy, right? Now you've got to get to actually delivering the projects. Whether you do it, a project management team in your division does it, or you hire an external company to deliver projects depending on the size, over the next year you're going to be delivering those projects and hopefully completing them. However, that's not the end of it, obviously. You need to continually think about the following year. What are you managing to get done? What have you not get done? What are the priorities? Maybe they've changed. And make your plan for the next year. It's a continuous process, and you have to think about it that way. And finally, doing this, managing assets, developing a capital plan for renewal, is a really important part of your profession. Even if you don't get all the funding you should, you've at least done your job to identify to senior management what the risks are if they don't fund it. And that's the bottom line.